ICQ Podcast episode 435, behind the scenes of running a special event station. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 435th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported this episode by a wealth of very kind donors, and of course our monthly subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie, Golf Zero Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a roundtable look at behind the scenes of running a special event station. Well, I can't stress it's your very kind donations that keep your ICQ podcast advert free and keeping us, as I say, on the air. And this month is our birthday month, and we've had a pouring of wonderful support. Some of it was detailed here, some of it as I had to make a cut and bring them into the next episode just on time and when they were coming through. So if you don't hear yours today, it should be picked up for you in the next episode. So we'd like to thank D. Renton, Roy Jones, Frank Westphal, Kilo 6, Foxtrot Whiskey 1, John Stagel, Whiskey 8, Uniform Charlie, for their very kind donations. So many thanks for you guys for supporting us. We'd like to thank Simon Wilton, VA3 Sierra India, and also has the call sign of Golf 7, Hotel Charlie Delta. And he says, listen to every episode. Long may you guys keep going. Always a good listen. And as he's told Martin, whenever I see the download on my app, it always gets a priority shuffle up to the play next status. So, Simon, that's great to know. And thank you there for, as I say, bumping us up the queue in your listening world. We'd like to thank Denny Morrison, Golf Mike 1, Bravo Alpha November. And he just says, nice to see, happy birthday. So thank you for that, Denny. We'd like to thank Stephen Lehman, Sierra Mike 5, Yankee Romeo Alpha. And he says, I will listen for 16 more years. Well done, the ICQ podcast team. So I say thanks for your support there, Stephen. And just think there's 16 more years of cups of tea for Mrs. B and treats. I'm sure she'll be very, very happy about that. Now, those very kind donors, along with our monthly subscription donors, they pay our way and produce what we call the value for value model. It's very simple. If you get value from your ICQ podcast, we ask you to visit our simplified donation page at icqpodcast.com/donate. You select one of the options there, and then you really two now to select, and then it gives you an opportunity to set up a subscription model if you wish, and then all those donations that we get help towards our running costs, and as they keep your show advert free. So please do consider that if you find any value in today's show. Right, well now we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank, Bill and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur radio news, including band usage in Canada and the ARRL moves forward with its 3-year strategy. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 435 of the ICQ Podcast Roundtable. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin, and hi the guys waiting in the wings, and happy to be here. And 435, the numbers, again, I know we keep saying this, but those numbers keep adding up, and 500 is just around the corner.
It ain't that far away, I tell you. A couple of years and we'll be there. Also, my side of the pond, waiting to get me into trouble as always, Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
He's back, 435, right in the middle of the 77s band. Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, we're doing okay, Martin, and I will catch up with you more as the week goes on.
We'll have a chat tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah, it's a busy week. But
on the old jelly bone.
Yeah.
It's on the landline, but we haven't got one of those anymore.
All right. Moving over to the other side of the pond, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, is with us tonight. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin. Hey, everybody. It's great to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back, Frank. And so we've had some great chats over the last couple of weeks, which has been fun. And I'll try and find another funny to send you at the weekend. Also, your side of the pond is Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Martin. Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Yeah, good to hear you, and great to have you with us. And he's back by popular demand in the UK.
Drum roll, drum roll.
Drum roll. It's Leslie.
No, I'm in trouble already. Good
Yeah.
evening, Martin.
Good evening, Leslie. Mr. Leslie Butterfields, G0CIB's with us. So we got a full house tonight, so it's a good one. Right, let's see what we got. Well, I quite like this one. And most of the stories, fortunately for our US listeners, but there's not a lot happening in the UK at the moment. Hopefully it'll change in the next week or so. But the ARRL were on the Weather Channel, and I think this is quite a coup. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, the Weather Channel is certainly the premier public outlet for weather information and coverage, particularly in storms and things like that. So it was indeed a coup for Bob Ingerbritsen, NQ1R, to be the face of ham radio for the Weather Channel segment that he appeared on. Now, it's important to note that one of the key things that amateur radio has going for it with regard to weather is the Hurricane Watch Net. And Bobby Graves, whose call sign escapes me here at the moment, used to live about 7 miles from me, south of my location. He moved to Starkville, Mississippi several years ago, and he has been a mover and a shaker in the Hurricane Watch Net. So I agree with you, Martin. I think it was a real coup for the ARRL and amateur radio, particularly, to be with Jim Cacciatore and all the other famous people on the Weather Channel. Yeah,
well, any publicity is good, but this must be a good one. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was really happy that this occurred because he got almost 4 minutes of airtime, which is, national, and it's pretty much unheard of unless you're dropping big money. So I thought that was really nice. They got on there, and he was able to also highlight the amateur radio emergency service that the ARRL, what's the right word, Frank? Manages, shepherds,
promotes. Yeah, they endorse and promote.
Yeah, and they and how they could get licensed. So you can get your ham radio license briefly. I thought that was really good. So I think that's going to have a pretty wide reach on getting folks that are moderately interested in it to get in. They didn't talk about it on this interview because they were focusing on the Hurricane WatchNet and some other stuff, but there's also the Skywarn program run through the National Weather Service. And if they could do the same thing for that as well, you can join the Skywarn without being a ham radio operator, but boy, is it easy during a major incident to just get on your local repeater that's, set up to your local National Weather Service office and give them direct reports of urgent and severe weather conditions. So overall, this video on the Weather Channel, great start. I hope it encourages more. I hope that the Weather Channel reaches out to them more, and I hope that we get some more folks in the hobby that are interested in weather. And because that's one of the 5,000 hobbies under the umbrella of amateur radio is things like weather spotting. So I think this was a really good positive story for the ARRL and amateur radio here in America.
Yeah, well, I think it was a good story for amateur radio worldwide, although it would probably only be seen in America. We're talking about it over here in the UK, so good publicity. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think everyone has said everything already. It's about getting publicity and promoting the hobby. What if you don't do that? Let's just sort of take a step back. Well, you see the clubs slowly shrinking down. And why is that? Because people aren't getting out. They're not meeting local people. They're not promoting the hobby. They're not selling it. You have to do that to keep the hobby going. And, some people leave for whatever reason. They move away. And if you do your job right, you get more people in. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's all about publicity. I mean, as a lady moved in about 4 doors down from me, and she's been there a couple of years, and Carol chats to her quite regularly, but I've never really met her until a couple of weeks ago. And the other day I saw her at the bottom of the road, and I said to her, jump in the car, I'll drop you home. And on the way home, she mentioned the aerials in the back of the house. And she said, when I first moved in, she said, I thought you were some kind of spy. And I went, no, amateur radio. But there you go. Martin, what's your thoughts?
He's like, I'm not a spy. I just like listening to number station. No, only kidding. My first thoughts when I see this, yay, TV publicity. I know the Weather Channel exists, as they referenced it on Back to the Future, I think, number 2. But I would ask the question, just out of curiosity, how big is the Weather Channel? It may go out on satellite, but, how big is their audience? But either way, great. The value of ham radio, amateur radio during storms and for emergency purposes, great. We've always said before, when all else fails, amateur radio. My initial thought of this was, did he include details of how to get a license? Bill mentioned that he did mention that. I have nothing bad to say about this. Great. I'm hoping it's on YouTube somewhere so I can go back and have a watch just out of pure curiosity. Well done, that man.
Oh, yes, please. I'll have a look.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably will end up there at some point in time. Chris, have we left anything to say on this?
Not a huge amount. I think it's good that the ARRL have gone out there and got involved and found an outlet to talk about amateur radio and discuss amateur radio in the mainstream media. It's always good to get it out there. I'm sure a lot of folks that see us, in the public, out and about, see us with an aerial up or, doing something looks slightly unusual because our hobby isn't that mainstream. Not everyone knows what we're doing. And actually, the more these things appear on the mainstream media, rather on the internet or on the news, on the TV, etc., or in this case, the Weather Channel, the more people have got an idea what we're actually doing, and just makes it a little bit easier. And the fact that this has been put in a positive light, talking about how amateur radio helps with regard to hurricanes, etc., hurricane watch, etc., then I think that's all putting what we do in a positive light, and it shows that we are generally positive. We're providing a benefit, not the opposite. So, when your neighbour's seeing you put an aerial up, well, actually they might think, well, hang on a minute, actually this person maybe actually having that person next door with an aerial with an amateur radio station, one day that actually might be quite useful. So, always sort of thing helps, just that sort of gradual influencing.
Play that video to your HOA, the Homeowners Association. We need this.
Just a quick one. Bill's popped up the link, so I'm going to watch that as soon as I can.
No problems at all. Well, I think everybody thinks this is a good one, and I'm glad. It's great publicity for amateur radio. Our next news story is a massive piece of work that you, Frank, did, and
wow,
I think people ought to be aware of it, and they can find it on your website, and I'll let you tell them about it. But you did a massive survey for the Radio Amateurs of Canada, and little bits have been coming out, but there's now quite an article up on your website, and probably more to come, isn't there, Frank? But interesting reading.
Thank you, Martin. Just to be clear, Paul Coverdale with the Radio Amateurs of Canada designed a survey that they conducted in 2021, and I volunteered to do the analysis of it. I'd also done another survey in 2023 with them that their regulator needed some information about on call signs. So I've been working with them as the professional survey researcher. Let me hit some high points. This Radio Amateurs of Canada survey 2021, I have a full report on my Fox Mike Hotel website where I put a lot of things like that. My K4FMH.com website is my main blog and main source of material that I write, and pulling out different topics. And this is one on band use. And we tend to think about characterizing ham radio operators as, okay, what do you do? Well, I'm HF, I'm DO, I'm on the repeaters, or, I'm on satellites. And so this particular focus gets into some of that. And we now have a good national survey. It may not be on the UK, it may not be on the US, but it is on Canada, and it is the first time we've had behavioral data on what hams actually say they do. So I want to hit just three main points, and not to take too much away from the other presenters. One is a simple graph that shows what's the most popular band. Well, the most popular band in Canada is 2 meters. 92% use 2 meters in a given month, followed by at 84% HF, 80 through 10. 70 sims comes in at about 2/3. Now, those are the only bands where in a given month that over half of all of Canadian hams say they utilize. Now, they don't all do just the same thing. So in Canada, 2 meters is king. And you might think, wow, it's a big country. Gosh, they can get 2 meters across the country. Well, if you look at the full report, I've got a nice map that shows where not just the survey respondents are, but all of the license holders in Canada from the regulator's database. I've geocoded them, and they tend to live in the major cities or close to the major cities on the southern border. So it makes sense. And if you look at repeater book, you can see that that's where the repeaters are too. So that 2 meter finding is not a big shocker if you just look at that map. A second point is this: if you were a national organization, whether it's RSGB, ARRL, Radio Amateurs of Canada, and you're dealing with your regulator and they say, now you ham people, are y'all using these frequencies? We got people that want them. Could you tell them how often hams use the frequencies? Well, in this national survey in Canada, just under 200,000 hours per month, 194,000 and change reported during 2021 over the 15 bands. Now, that in itself may not do much for you, but to a regulator, that tells them something. Now, everybody isn't on all the time. It averages out to be about 1 hour per day. I did something a little different here. You know, we talked to hams in a variety of places, in a variety of ways, whether it's on the air at Hamfest or rallies, whether we talk through publications or online places like QRZ, eHam, and others. And we pick up things about what people do. I took all of the time that each ham in the survey said they spent on ham radio. It might have been 5 hours a month. Another one might have said, I spend 300 hours a month. Whatever that was, I then allocated it to a activity portfolio. What percent of all the time that you spend, whether it's large or small, is spent on each band? And in my blog post and in the full report, you see some really clear differences in the patterns of hobby behavior here. It varies greatly. Some live on 2 meters, some live on HF, but not everyone. And it gives us some real insight into some of the newer band allocations that we've had down below 160 meters, and then the microwave frequencies way up there. So that's a second one. And I'll end with my part with this. The age differences in band use were not that dramatic. Far less dramatic in some of the other portions of the survey. So I'll ring off with that one, Martin. I think those are at least some of the highlights.
Yeah, I was fascinated when I saw this, and I mentioned to you, I said, well, you know, surprised that Canada is 2 meters, you know, and you did say, well, it's to do with geographics that most people live along the southern border with the US, so that makes sense. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of detail in this, and I frankly have not had time to go through it, but there's a huge amount of detail which is good from the Canadians. We used to talk a lot on the podcast about an international survey that was done, but I think that was done by, I think, an individual, and it was a bunch of questions, and I certainly used to respond to it. That seems to be not going anymore. I'm not sure why. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting that the 2 meter band is obviously the most popular, followed by, I guess, the general HF bands. Not really got an awful lot to say, I suppose, on this myself. It's interesting to see that you know, it's obviously still alive and kicking in Canada, and you know, I guess this sort of thing helps. I think as Frank was saying, to justify that we have a license and that we're actually using the privilege that we've been given. Otherwise, as we always get told, you know, use it or lose it. So this, I guess, that helps to provide some of that evidence to the local regulators to say, yes, we are using it. Please, let's continue to do so. So, but not much else to add on that, really, Martin. The expert on this one is obviously Frank.
Yeah. Well, as I say, some interesting ones. Yeah, I'm looking at the VHF, UHF bands, and 2 meters, 77s. But in the States and Canada, you've got 220 megahertz, and there isn't a massive amount on 220. I think the highest number is 24%, but nowhere near as popular as 2 and 70. So, very interesting to see. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I'm actually going to pick on Frank here for a second. Frank, on your Fox Mike Hotel website, was that the full report I read?
Yeah, on Fox Mike Hotel, if you look under my hamography, clearly a made-up name, you'll see studies, and under that it'll be radio amateurs in Canada, and that link gives you the full report.
Yeah. Now this is an extract just talking about band usage.
Yeah, this is simply one segment of that I put on my blog.
Yeah, and it kind of matches my impression / this feels realistic based on, the folks that I know at the various radio clubs locally, within a couple 100-mile radius. I mean, I'm not on the repeaters as much as they are, but I know folks are on the repeaters, are using them. I know right behind that, folks are on HF, which that includes me. A lot more UHF repeaters have shown up, so that number seems pretty correlatable. And then the next right after that is 6 meters, which I know a lot of folks around here, I would think probably close to half now that people are doing FT8 on 6 meters.
I'd say 46% was the number in Canada. See, so that's not
this survey was from 2021, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's kind of recent, so that might be a new trend. One of the things you had in the main report that I thought was really interesting was you described the tool that you used. You can what you can draw conclusions from and what you really can't, and that I think that actually makes the whole survey more valid, because you basically list out the limitations. Because you just opted in, it was people opting in. It wasn't you had to take this survey kind of thing, but you had really good turnout actually.
Bill, this is technically called a post hoc assessment, and it's done in all professional surveys. And shocker, you'll find a lot of the major surveys today, because of the use of cell phones, have gone to opt-in surveys that are post hoc stratified. That's a gobbledygook term for we make the demographics of what we have look like what they should be in terms of weighting. And so I went through that with this, and this was not just RAC members. There were many non-RAC members as well. So that's why I'm willing to put kind of, if you will, my reputation as a professional survey researcher, that this is not a $500,000 study, but for those that are based upon a promoted opt-in, it's the best I've seen. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It's just the best.
That's the next thing I was going to say. This is the best one of those I've ever seen in any industry, period. Let alone you had really good turnout. Because usually when you send out these kind of surveys, you get the same group of people that feel like filling out surveys. And this really got a huge cross-section of the folks in Canada. So kudos to that. And that's the only thing
RAC did a good job with that, Bill. And I'll have to say, Paul Coverdale, who's a pretty well-known Canadian ham, he actually prepared the survey instrument. And after any study, you say, gosh, I wish we'd have known whether it was D-Star they were using on the digital voice mode or whatever. Well, he didn't ask that. Well, so what? I mean, this is the first cut, and I'm certainly encouraging them to repeat this in a couple of years, say after a 5-year interval, so we get some metrics of change, and maybe add a couple of those little questions that we weren't able to. But Paul Coverdale deserves a round of applause for doing a superb job with the question construction and stuff.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. It was very impressive. So I hope this ends up being a model that other organizations around the world will eventually adopt, to do similar kinds of surveys to see if we can get a really good picture of how amateur radio is modernizing over the whole world, actually. But
Well,
thank you
Bill,
very much.
ARRL had a proposal for this 5 years ago. Their board approved it. They hired a new CEO, and he promptly canned it. So, for whatever. So
it happens.
New CEO, new priorities. I know how that goes.
Yeah. If
Anyway,
one man doesn't think it's, or one man or one lady doesn't think it's right, then it don't happen.
Well, I'm so impressed about RAC, and again, I'm a member. I'm so impressed. They want to know the answer, and they're committed to putting the raw data on their website. They did that in the call sign survey. And let me just say it like this. Sometimes if you're a chief executive officer, you kind of don't want some survey findings getting in the way of what you want to do. And that's a completely different orientation about management. And we had Phil McBride on in a feature I did a couple of years ago when he was first elected. And their CEO, they don't call it that, but is someone who's committed to this kind of thing. So, Bill, I'm volunteering lots of my time and what would be probably a $25,000 consulting fee to do it, just do a report like this with existing data. I do that gratis because I am so impressed with their commitment in managing radio amateurs of Canada and being open and as transparent as possible. So,
Here. And that's the only comments I have on this, Martin.
Yeah, well, they're all interesting comments, guys, all interesting. Leslie, go on, what's your thoughts?
Well, Frank is obviously the expert in this field, and there's no question about this whatsoever. So they've got one of the best guys on the business. What I would say, and this sort of goes into your CEO comment, that amateur radio has been in the past been driven by opinions and personal perceptions. They're not always correct. Not only are they not always correct, but we may miss things. And when you're talking to government bodies and regulators, they're not really interested in personal opinions. They're interested in where's the facts? Where did you get this from? And sometimes when you look at these things, there's a few red faces because, like I said, they've based things on personal opinion. It doesn't always work. You've got to get your facts and you've got to do your homework and you've got to get your data. And this is what this is all about. And this gives you the weapon, if you like, to move forward. Maybe weapon's too strong a word, but you understand what I mean. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I agree. Martin, have we left you anything else to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at this, and typically there's a lot of surveys that come out that I don't always pay too much attention to, and I never typically do surveys purely simply because you do all this stuff and you never get the results or see what they're going to do with it. Frank made an interesting comment earlier. People don't want survey findings getting in the way of what you want to do. That sounds political, but let's not go there. Now, statistically, let's leave the Donald out of this. Now, I always take statistics, especially when they're prepared by management in any form, with a pinch of salt, or in some cases a bucket of salt. But Frank's involved here, and I trust Frank, and he's got no biased interest to generate it one way or another. And I haven't read it in infinite detail, but the results of this, I wonder how it would compare elsewhere in the world. I'm not overly surprised by this. 2 meters is the most popular. Yeah, it probably is in the UK as well. HF, 80 meters to 10 meters is second. Then there's things like 160 meters, less popular. Well, of course it will be. You need massive antennas, the same for 136 kilohertz, 2,200 meters. As are microwaves, it's harder to do, less off-the-shelf equipment available. You need point-to-point line of sight. So I do think a lot of this would be very similar if you were to do this in the UK or other parts of the world. I'm not saying everywhere in the world, because there are people that are further out, and things like the outback in Australia, they might not find 2 meters particularly useful, whereas HF might be a lot more useful there.
Martin, let me interject this briefly, just because I've done it. I've actually geocoded all the hams in Australia, and they live along their coast as well. They don't live in the inner.
They absolutely do. Yeah, I heard one of the radio shows out there. He said, so there's not much of in the middle of Australia. We all live around the edge. We all stay close to water. We've got beautiful beaches. Like, that's a fair point. The only other thing is I'm curious what they use 902 to 928 megahertz for. That would be exponential in the UK because that belongs to the mobile phone operators. But I'm wondering what people are doing there. I'm guessing it's just another like UHF 23 SEMS type of band. But this kind of stuff, this is gold dust to the regulators, and I guess what's the Canadian version of the ARRL?
Radio Amateurs of Canada.
Radio Amateurs. So for them, this again is absolute gold dust when the regulator says, "Hey, we need this band to sell to the broadcasters, the phone operators, or anything like that." And well, hang on a second, we've done this. Like, we are using this, but how about you take away this band that hardly anybody uses? Bit more ammo. So yeah, everybody that was in Frank and everyone else that was involved in this, kudos to you. This is one of those things I am going to go back and read in a lot more detail. I've sort of skim-read it as we were going through this, but it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So Frank, I know you're one of us, but I think you did a great job on this one, getting the information into a format that we can all understand. So that was a great one. You're working with the Radio Amateurs of Canada, so good one.
He's spent a long time colouring it in as well. It looks really pretty.
Yeah. Right, let's move to our next news story, still over in the States. I'm going to get Bill to go first on this one because you've been first twice, Frank. The ARRL board completes a 2024 second meeting, approves a report to advance a 3-year strategy. So they come up with a 3-year strategy. What do you think, Bill?
Oh, it's good. This whole thing's good. I was reading through the minutes, and I also read Dan's blog, which we'll have a link on the ICQ podcast for. But Dan just put up this morning a really good summary of the minutes as well. Right off the bat, I want to shout out to Ed Wilson, N2XDD. He is now the Hudson Division Director. He took over after the Division Director stepped down, and this was his first board meeting. You guys that went to Dayton with us probably remember Ed. We had a drink with him, and he is a very, very intelligent and passionate and cool dude with a lot of neat stories. So I think he's going to be a good fit in there because he has some pretty good ideas, and I like his general thinking as we were talking there. What was the name of that place, Martin? We went to dinner. I can't remember.
The Troll Pub, if I remember right.
Name. Yes. And then the other thing is they have. I'm trying to find it here, the exact words, but they're doing a 3-year strategy, which is a good idea for any organization. And they have a revised mission statement. The ARRL's mission is to promote and protect the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio and to develop the next generation of radio amateurs. That is way better than they have in the past. So I think they're starting to look in the right direction, and they're focusing on the right thing. They also put in there that they're going to do some new advocacy. Dan pointed out in his blog that they're focusing on the youth, and they might be missing out by not targeting on midlife folks that are looking for a hobby. And, amateur radio, as I've said, is 5,000 hobbies under the same umbrella. So there's a lot of variety and things there that could really capture somebody that's around my age. It's so weird to say now because it's like I feel like I'm still 20, but I'm not. But anyway, I think this overall board minutes that came out was good. One thing that they added is they are establishing an information technology advisory committee. They used to have something like this, if I recall. So it's back or new, and hopefully they'll take cybersecurity as a high priority. Likewise, they're reassigning the logbook of the World Maintenance Committee to that new committee. So they will have some other eyes looking at it too, which is good. And they talked about advocacy. They talked about governance, which maybe someone else will dig into a little bit more. And they discussed defending their trademarks. Now, I always kind of roll my eyes at this stuff, but it really, when you have a large organization, your trademark ends up being your image, so that you almost have to defend it, or else you're like derelict in duties. So I'm glad that by the next meeting they're going to actually go through and talk about how they're defending their trademarks a little bit better. That'll be interesting as well. But overall, the minutes seem pretty good this time. And one of the things that Dan pointed out, that he he's not on the podcast this week, but he pointed this out, but it's true. There's nothing in the report that points to the ARRL taking a leadership position in technology development. It's a technical hobby, and the hobby's national organization should take a leadership role in the technology. I agree with Dan on that. That is one thing I noticed when I read it, that aside from the mission statement, they kind of washed over that a little bit. And I just hope that's due to focusing on other things, such as promoting the hobby, inspiring the youth, and serving members and driving growth. So I'm hoping that's how that works out. But overall, as far as board minutes come out of the ARRL, this one seemed pretty positive to me as I read it. So I'm pretty optimistic at this point.
Well, that generally sounds good news, Bill. Now, Frank, I know you posted or sent this to me and made me aware of it. So what's your thoughts?
I agree with Bill's general sentiment. I mean, this is far and away a less sanitized version of their board minutes. I like Dan, and I don't know who else. Bill, I'm not sure if you get these. You may not be a member. I think I get these things by email, and just because I asked to get them, and they're usually like, we had a meeting, we talked, we ended the meeting. I mean, I hate to be that blasé about it, but it's not a lot more than that in terms of details. And Dan has written on his blog, kind of criticizing that you might as well not have a public release if you're just going to do that way. Now, this is not that, and Bill was well said in doing that. Let me take a little bit of a critical tone. The advocacy being created, they're focusing on schools to reach youth. Okay. They have doubled down with that. Our library initiative, I'm told that was something that they're going to put on their website, and they're going to do. No, they're not. And this has got to do with the CEO. The CEO hired his person, got a teachers institute. They're going to double down and go schools. I wish them well. I truly do. But I do think they're missing out on reaching young people and women, because as the research has shown, they go to libraries more than they go to movie theaters. All right, so that's one little critical thing. They are moving along the digital transformation. Print products are going to lie fallow here within the next 5 years to 10 years as the baby boomers die off. That's just a blunt assessment of that. Couple of little things here that struck me. Bill talked about the ITAC, the Information Technology Advisory Committee, and geez, have they needed that. I knew some of that was coming from conversations with individual board members, not necessarily my own. But there's a couple of things they mentioned. They're going to assign somebody to look at governance. Our listeners who are members of ARRL or not, or former, may not know this. You vote for a section manager. It's usually the state, but for many states, they're large enough that they're chopped up into multiple states. So it's a section. Okay, that goes back to hiram Percy Maxim and trying to get messages transferred across the country. You vote for that person. Do you realize that that person has absolutely zero say in Newington? No. They report to Field Services Director. They are told what to do. They don't tell what should be done. Now, in fact, they can say, I think you need to go left. I'm sorry, section manager, we're going right. Okay, so remember, your first line that you vote for, they have no say. Your second line is a division, which is a collection of sections, the division director, who is also a board member. They're not supposed to tell staff to do stuff. Their only job is to make policy, to do certain executive things, personnel, and to hire and not rehire a CEO. Okay, so you elect them. They can't get a specific thing done unless it goes through the machinations of HQ at Newington. Often, if the CEO doesn't want to do it, what are you going to do? You vote to not renew their contract, and you got to get enough people to do that. So here's my point. Now, one more. The president. You think, the president of ARRL. Did I vote for him or her? No, you didn't. That's an inside vote of the members of the board of directors. I've personally never known a member of that board. I hadn't known them all, but I hadn't known a board member who didn't have some little aspiration that one day I'd like to be president of ARRL. So think about this, friends and family. The first three levels of election have no say over what goes on in Newington unless they fire the CEO. So how are you going to deliver service to members when the members' input are the ones who get marched around, more or less? And the board members get marched around by these rules in this workbook that they had. I remember if I say N2RJ in the Hudson division, you see what happened recently when she wound up leaving that because of an internal dispute over what the rules for board members are. So the government's piece, until it becomes a bottom-up, authority-driven thing, they will never deliver the service that members will really want and get Bill Barnes back into the membership fold, just as an example. The equivalent of RSGB would to get Martin Rothwell back as a member of RSGB because you got to convince them it's worth their money, right? And that's the
Not
general
happening,
problem. Well, but that's the general problem. That's the general problem.
I'm rolling in towards my 250 sticker for my DXCC, so I will rejoin for that.
Right, but you get my point. I mean, here up close and personal, we have friends and family on the podcast who this touches their lives. Okay, so that's something they really need if they're going to solve the problem of occasionally being a dumpster fire of mismanagement of their organization. They're going to have to reverse the power chain. If the individual members don't have any say, then they're not going to continue to be members. Okay. Now, the last little thing I'll comment on, they authorized new publications, including books and online resources. I want to say it'll be a new journal or something. We just had the big issue over QST and that sort of thing. And they authorized new products, such as Antenna Kit. And they're legitimating this because they're hams who they don't have station building capabilities. So we got to sell them something to help them. As if the advertisers don't sell things that help hams get on the air. They've got a Moxon antenna that follows on with their end-fed kit that they've had. This is a new venture for ARRL. And Martin, I'll kind of end with this. I know all that sounds very, very critical, but I think members have to have a little bit of a critical eye toward helping improve things. And that's the spirit in which I sort of make those comments. I agree with Bill. It's a far better set of minutes than I have seen maybe ever before that came out after a board meeting.
Yeah, I agree, Frank. And the more information we have, the more honest we can be in the discussion. And you've brought some very valid points up. So I think, that is more valid. Right. Chris, what's your thoughts?
I have not much else to say. I mean, Frank has gone through an awful lot of detail there, and I really haven't got really much else to add, really. I mean, strategy seems to be sensible to me. It seems to be stuff we've sort of heard before, promoting amateur radio, protecting amateur radio, inspiring and educating youth, serving members through and driving growth through technology. Certainly the first of those seem to be things that I think a lot of societies national societies are going after, and makes a lot of sense. I'm just reading through Dan's blog post. I think there's a couple of areas that he's not too keen on. I think one of them was around essentially trying to increase revenues, but not necessarily by increasing the number of members, which is interesting. So perhaps looking at other ways to generate revenue. But I think generally it's good news. I think the point Bill made around the sort of technology capability, I think, is a good one. Having a rethink about their technical capabilities, I think, in terms of obviously running the business or running the organisation, and looking to perhaps streamline or to improve their IT operations, I think makes a lot of sense, especially given what has happened recently to them with their outage a little while ago. So but not much else from me on this one, Martin.
Yeah, some interesting state comments though, Chris. Interesting at all. Martin, your thoughts on this one?
I don't have that much to say on this. It looks like they're making steps in the right direction. They've been given the go-ahead to progress. That's good. I pretty much agree with everything that's been said already. Frank made some very, very valid points. The only thing I would say is that other member bodies, and they know who they are, should probably take note of things like this, because that would really help them go in the right direction.
Okay, I'll take your point on board. Leslie, you spotted something in this that you weren't very comfortable about, didn't you?
Oh, really? Why did you pick on me, Martin?
Well, because I know you know about these things.
In a previous life. Anyway, I think Frank has made some absolutely excellent points, especially about trying to get ideas from the grassroots and bring them up through the system. If you want something to happen locally, don't bother about the organisations, just get on with what you've got to do and not worry about it. So that's only my own personal experience. But hey, let's go through this stuff. First of all, he was talking about mission statements and strategies. I know that when we're looking at this, what we call business speak, the eyes roll at the back of the head and all this stuff. And I get that. I mean, I'm an engineer. I'm not a fan of it. But basically what they're trying to do is to get clarity in what they're trying to achieve. I'll say that again. They're getting clarity in what they're trying to achieve. Now, these mission statements and strategies, people don't really take much notice of them. But what it does, it sets a tone. This is what we're trying to do. And it should trickle down, and it affects the culture and the way of working of an organisation. So if you get that first bit wrong, and that should also lead into the values of the organisation, and if you get that wrong, it's like a fish. It stinks of the head, and that goes through the whole organisation. I've visited organisations where I can work it out within 5 minutes it's wrong. And others, you just think, yeah, this is a great place to work. So anyway, that's the thoughts on that. Technology. Well, I've noticed over the years that when there is a new technology like, let's say, SSB, people tend to throw their hands up and say, the amateur radio is doomed. It's not going to go anywhere. It's finished. We don't want all this nonsense. And the same when the PCs come on, PCs and what we're doing on the internet now. And famously, there was a company called Kodak, and there was with a digital camera. No, we don't want that. And it was
I know his story.
Yeah, it was invented by one of their own engineers. No, we're not doing that. And it directly led to the demise of that company. Anyway, so technology is not your enemy. It's there to help. It's a tool. Now, the other thing Frank picked up on was equipment. I personally, and this is only my own view, it's sort of going outside their remit as such. I think they ought to concentrate on doing the things that they said about membership and promoting the hobby and protecting amateur radio. The other things I think are great. Now, the other thing that Frank picks up on is ideas going through the system. You get a thing that you have a volunteer, and organisations are made up of volunteers. Some are great, some put an awful lot of effort in, some having lots of enthusiasm, and some have knowledge. and it's about using that sort of mixture of people to get to make the organisation work. And I think because you need people with knowledge, that's a fact, and you need people with enthusiasm that can go out and set up stalls and all this type of thing. And if you sort of fill it full of clever people, that's fine, because you're never going to get anything done. I may be exaggerating on that slightly, but this is what happens. So you need to bring those two together, and they all have to work. Now, my local club, not radio club, I must add, they couldn't get that to work. There was people with knowledge that couldn't work with other people, and for a while, it's about 2 years, that organisation it was, how can I say, what's the word? It was just, it just went through 2 years of madness. So it's very, very important. Now, there was one other thing I picked up on, was governance. The board requested the president appoint a study group to review the current structure of ARRL governance. Where have I heard this before? I think it reminds me of Greeks and Trojan horses. And with that thought, I'll leave people with that thought and pass it over to you, Martin.
Okay, so you're now going to make me think about this for days, aren't you? But never mind, I'll let you off, Leslie.
You got me on my hubby's falls. It's your fault.
All right, no problems at all. No problems at all. Well, some good information, guys, on this story that's come out. We're going to move to our next news story. This one's going to run long. For those of you who don't like it long, I apologise. This one's going to run long. First, M17-based radio begins shipping. Now, M17 is this digital mode that's open source, that's had promised to happen for probably over 5 years. And until a manufacturer started shipping, I think there was very little you could do with M17, apart from a few modifications. But this could be a good one. Martin, do you want to go first?
Well, I like the concept of it. I'll be honest with you, I've looked at the radio. It's coming from Connect Systems. It looks like a Chinese copy of a Motorola. Some of the specs, uninspiring, 400 megahertz to 512. What about VHF? If you put VHF in the radio, suddenly you've got an everyday carry radio, because not everyone wants to carry just a UHF radio. That's why we like the Anytones. Programming ports compatible with Motorola. Why? Motorola have horrible programming ports. Use the Kenwood one, like all the other designs that are coming out now. So it looks to be, a lot of the features in it look to be the standard Chinese design that you don't see from the big three manufacturers. There's a lot of similarities in this that I'm seeing with the likes of Baofeng and Woxham. Now but I look at this, and I wonder how much truth there is, because Connect Systems were rumoured to be building a dual-band D-Star Fusion DMR radio a few years back, and it hit all the amateur radio news and everyone went wild on it. But it never happened. And it's like, is this actually going to happen? Is this real? Does this actually exist? Is anyone running M17 at the moment? You people have got to build a network. You've come out with yet another digital mode. I say come out with it, they exist, but they're going about another digital mode. Just pick one and run with it. Or build one that is the best of everyone. Get everyone together. I have a feeling that Edmund had a Connect Systems radio that again is a 77s radio. And from looking at that I seem to think the software on it looked very, very much like it was Motorola based, or if not Motorola based, very similarly designed. So I wonder how much is not copied but borrowed / inspired by Motorola. But again, if they make these radios dual band, suddenly you're onto something. But the fact that it's M17, looking at the website, it looks like you might be able to convert it between DMR and M17. If it does both, that could be a unique selling point for it. But if you could put Fusion and D-Star in it, and make it dual band, then you're really onto something. But I'll be interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Edmund's got, I think it is actually a CS7000 for DMR. And I helped him program it a couple of years ago, and quite honestly, I can't remember much about it now because I've programmed so many radios in my life. But I didn't think the software was that inspiring, put it that way, from what I remember. Yeah, we technically on the ICQ podcast talk group could support M17 coming in. I need to do some work to get a radio for M17 to finish off, and maybe this is what I need to do now.
Are there other radios already available for M17?
No, you can technically mod a TYT 380, the UHF only version, of which I bought one a number of years ago purely to do this when M17 became available in any numbers. Until that point, it was pretty pointless converting it out of DMR mode. So that's where I'm on that one, Mike.
And Martin is stealing my thunder. So M17 isn't something I know an awful lot about. But yes, just doing a little bit of Googling, it looks like it's giving people choice. It's another mode to play with, which is always a good thing. It looks like it's got some similar features to some of the other digital voice modes that we have in amateur radio. And yes, Martin, the thing you're referring to is something called the Open RTX firmware, which does implement M17 on certain radios. And like you say, it's the MD380 DMR radio. Certain models of that. Not all of them, and please go and do research before you go and buy one and try this out. Just don't take my word for it. But there is a way to update the firmware on that particular handheld to allow it to work with M17. But of course, what's happened here is Connect Systems have actually gone away and kind of gone with, you kind of got an officially supported, piece of hardware that will do this. And as with a lot of things that are new and early adopters, it's quite expensive. It's $300. Which is fairly expensive for a handheld. But if this becomes popular, no doubt, a bit like years ago when you bought a VCR, the first people that bought those probably paid an awful lot of money, and then as they started to sell a lot more of them, prices came down, and it's the same with a lot of in the world of technology. That seems to be what happens. But it's interesting, and is there? I suppose for me, the question is there a space in the market for M17? We have three main choices now. We've got DMR Fusion and D-Star, and they've all been around different lengths of time. They've all got their own place in the market. And I suppose what is it that makes what's the unique selling point for M17? Might be interesting perhaps one day to get someone on the podcast. I think we may have had in the past actually talked about people about M17. But yeah, what's the killer reason to go out and make this popular? I know that it's open source, and it seems to be an amateur radio specific system, unlike DMR, which is for commercial use as well. And D-Star and Fusion are both proprietary and have components, at least certainly in the case of D-Star, that are commercial, and in the case of Yaesu, it's their system, so it's copyright and it's got it's closed source to them. So I suppose being open source is in the spirit of amateur radio, but are they too late to the party? Are people going to adopt this in great numbers? I think the great attraction with DMR was the fact you could buy a cheap handheld radio from the Far East, because there's a big market for DMR, because it's not just amateur, it's also, every supermarket, certainly in this part of the world, in Europe, every, shopping centre has security guards that have DMR radios. Every building site and people have DMR radios. It's a very, very popular system, meaning that they're making those units in volume, and that's made those handhelds very cheap to pick up for the amateur world. So that's how it got a lot of traction. Whether or not M17 can make any headway and get into that market, maybe other manufacturers will come along and adopt it as well. We'll see over the next few years whether this is going to be able to compete on those lines.
Yeah, I think it's one we can look at. Leslie, have you any thoughts on this? Because I know you don't really do digital stuff, do you?
I've got to be honest, Martin, I don't. I did try it, but I need someone to decode a lot of the I'm just trying to find the right word on this one. You need somebody pointing you in the right direction. I need somebody to point me in the right direction, and yeah, that's an honest answer. Yeah,
I think the problem is if you haven't done it, Chris, Martin, and I, and probably Frank, Bill, have spent hours getting our head around the different digital modes and how
The
you program.
terminology, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
You need to understand what the terminology means and how it all fits together.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest barriers to get the rank and file ham off of FM and into digital right there, Leslie.
Thank you, Frank. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
By far, you're not the only one.
It's obviously going that way. The old analog systems, be they FM or AM, are on the way out. They're still useful for amateur stuff. I still use it myself, but the trend is definitely going towards digital. And at some point, I need to sit down and learn about it.
Yeah, well, we can sit and chat with you about it.
In English, please.
Oh, yeah. It's...
Tell me what it means.
Yeah, well, things like, and this is only one thing, things like colour codes, think of it as CTCSS, but you only have 15 of them, or 16 actually. So they call them colour codes instead of CTCSS, things like that. So we can sit down with you, Leslie, at some point.
Anyway, thank you, Frank. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I've been part of Jerry Wanger, who's the president and CEO of Connect Systems, part of his kind of mailing list. And I've bought a couple of products from him over the years. And the group is right. I think Martin Rothwell mentioned the early on, hey, I'll try to get my arms around these three major protocols and bring them out. And there were a number of reasons. Of D-Star licensing at the time was fairly expensive. WiresX was never going to be something you could get your arms around. And then later YSF came out, and you kind of go on and on. So that was a pie in the sky moment that he tried to jump into. And like so many of us, we sometimes step off and then look down and there's nothing under our foot. So, but having said that, there are two versions of this current radio. I see this as mostly a milestone. Okay, it's a milestone that the first out of the box M17 radio is shipping on the commercial market, not independent of the TYT MD380 that you can mod. I also have one of those. I haven't modded it. So there's two versions of this CS7000-M17. There's the $299 version, which is the M17. Then there's the $449 version that is the plus version. And like so many products, the $299, you can run any one protocol, DMR, analog, or M17. You can have any one of them that you want in that radio. Well, that relegates that to what I would call a specialty radio. You do that handset when you want to do M17. Gosh, why would you buy it for just DMR? Because there's so much cheaper solutions, right? And of course, on analog, gosh, did I say Baofeng? Don't make me use the B word. So that's one difference. Now, it gets a little more exciting on the plus model because you can run all three modes at the same time. And this particular radio is said to be about 3 times faster than the $299 one. It's got twice the program memory and 4 times the flash memory to hold contacts, channels, and other parameters. So here is a radio that the plus model, which is about half of what, say, the current Kenwood HT that so many people are doing YouTube videos over and whatever. It's about the same price, give or take, of our favorite Anytone that several of us have here. So it's situated to get you into M17 at that price point. And, oh, by the way, you can do analog and DMR. So I get that. It's a little bit of a shoehorn, type of thing. Now, my subjective evaluation is this is what I call a hotspot radio. You're going to use this with a hotspot. Hey, there's this ICQ podcast that might be able to support M17. And that would be a way to buy this product. You're committed to this open source protocol and you've got a hotspot. And there's this cool podcast that's available in United Kingdom, Europe, and United States of America. And they've got this great universal language. If we were on Star Trek, we'd have the interpreter. You can come in at anything and come out on whatever, for the most part. Wires X not included, and analog not included. So that's how I look at this, folks. It's a hotspot radio. You'd use it with a hotspot. If, in fact, Martin and company want to operationalize the M17 protocol support, it may help sell a few radios. But I see this as a milestone that today, or at least September when they're supposed to ship, we actually have a commercial radio that will use the M17 protocol.
Yeah, interesting what you said there, Frank. And I'd say one other thing. I mean, our talk group does YSF, DMR, D-Star. It also does P25 and NXDN. I doubt if anybody much uses P25 and NXDN, and I believe at the moment that M17 is halfway set up, so if somebody joins us on M17, we can talk to them. I haven't got it set up to initiate a call on M17. And maybe I need to do that, but the three big names, the DMR, D-Star and Fusion, are the three that seem to be being used all the time. And the others, I know P25 and NXDN are available, but I don't think anybody uses it coming into our network. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what everyone else said at this point. It's good that we now have a commercial M17 radio that's available soon that folks can buy if they're interested in that mode. Kind of touching on what folks were hinting at. I mean, I'm not running out and buying an M17 radio until, I get some repeaters around here and start using that protocol. And I think long-term M17 is going to be a winner because it's completely open source and doesn't have any proprietary codecs. Because D-Star has a proprietary codec, DMR has a proprietary codec, and I'm not sure about the other ones if they do or not. But in general, I mean, this is the first of hopefully many M17 radios that come out. I'm assuming, and this is a big leap here, that at some point somebody's going to make a repeater that's M17. You just buy the repeater and it's ready to install. That, I think, is when we'll see more M17 adoption, at least here in the States. One thing Frank said that I liked, I never heard the phrase before, hotspot radio, but it makes perfect sense because I do see a lot of UHF low-end DMR HTs floating around that are very inexpensive, and they are perfect for the hotspot. And it's like, oh yeah, I bet you that's why folks are buying them. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Bill, I'm hoping that Bridgecom Systems will look seriously at an M17 repeater, or at least a DMR/M17 repeater. I don't know what the costing would be on that, but I'm hopeful they may take a look at it.
Yeah, I believe there are a few M17 repeaters in the States, and I believe that, I know there are a number of talk groups, or whatever they use the terminology for them, available worldwide. So,
are they Frankenstein repeaters where they're kludged together, or is there a commercial manufacturer of an M17 repeater?
I think it's a kludged together, or Frankenstein.
Okay,
but which is what most repeaters start out with initially, don't they? Until the big boys manufacture repeaters.
Yeah.
So yeah. Right, let's move to our next one because we're running long. Hackers to hams. Sure. This is one of Dan's stories. And Dan's not with us tonight, but Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure, yeah. This one's interesting. This is our fellow ICQ podcast presenter, Dan, who we know also writes books and just training courses. And he's very much hooking into this kind of hacker community. And he was at an event in New York, and he was doing his one-day tech class at an event for hacking called the Hackers on Planet Earth or Hope conference, which is he's suggesting was actually quite a good place to sort of do that, and we said it worked out pretty well. And Dan managed to get himself on our newsline, for example, so it's something that's got a bit of publicity around it as well. Interestingly, Dan, I know in the past has done one-day tech classes at DEF CON. DEF CON is, for those that aren't aware, is the big hacker conference every year in Las Vegas. I know he did that a couple of years ago. I don't know if he's done it more recently, but that was, Dan's obviously trying to look for and quite successful at, should we say, sister hobbies or sister communities that may have an interest in amateur radio. And certainly this one, people that like to understand how the inside of a computer works and perhaps exploit some of that stuff, is exactly the sort of similar person, that similar curious mind to people that like to work out how the inside of radios work and the sorts of things that we get up to. So I think there's some massive similarities there, and I think Danny's trying to show people that actually this might be a hobby for you as well. I think he's onto something, and hope it might attract some folks into the hobby. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, that was a good one from Dan. Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, Martin, I was reading through it, and the only two words that came to mind was "Go Dan." I think it's great. Why not? It brings more people into the hobby. It's publicity for the hobby, and I know they get involved in all sorts of weird and wonderful projects. So more power to Dan on that one.
Yeah, well, it's a technical subject. Amateur radio is a technical subject, and you're talking to technical people, so they should enjoy it, I would guess. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, this was a really good blog post by Dan, and it went really well for him, and I think it's a really good start. In fact, he had put in his blog post that someone approached him from the Philadelphia Maker Faire about coming next spring to do a class. That's another community that's related that would be great to start getting folks into the hobby from. So I think he's doing a really good job here with ham radio evangelist with various communities and stuff. It's very, very, very encouraging. Way to go, Dan.
Yeah, good one, Dan. Martin, your thoughts on this one?
Dan's involved with it. It's got to be good. It's got to be worthwhile.
Absolutely.
We did correct it earlier because I think Chris corrected it in the notes. It said ham radio lecturer and educator. Let's get it right. ICQ podcasts Dan Romanchek, who also lectures and educates in ham radio. As we said, this is tech. And there are some really interesting YouTube channels out there on sort of ethical hackers and things like that use RF for various projects and things like that. And there was something like a hack. I want to say the name Pineapple. There's some kind of like RF device that has Pineapple in the name or something like that they use. And I think they're probably based on like ISM bands or Wi-Fi bands. But a lot of those hackers in those videos have mentioned like it would be great to have a ham radio license to be able to use more power to do this kind of thing or whatever. This falls right into that, and I sort of read those comments like, why don't you just go and get your ham radio license? Dan's done something about this. It's the whole thing of, he said before, get on the air. Well, you want to do something, go get your license, and he'll help you do it. Dan's a lovely guy. Just pay attention.
I think there are so many overlaps. The Pineapple, by the way, is a Wi-Fi device. I'm sure Bill will confirm for testing Wi-Fi networks and trying to hack into them. But absolutely, Wi-Fi is radio. So we're in the same space here, guys. Let's think Dan's identified that and is making things happen, which is great.
Yes, certainly is. Frank, have we left you anything to say on this one?
Oh, sure. And to me, this is where one of the places. I hesitate to say that one thing is the only thing we should do, but this is one of the spaces we need to be in. And Dan is an outstanding person to be there. I seem to recall that ARDC may have given him a little bit of money to do some of this ambassador work with. Dan can correct me if I'm off on that, but I just think this is terrific. And I'm glad that Karen at Amateur Radio Newsline picked up on it. And I will say this, Jenny List, who's pretty famous on her ham radio related topics on hackaday.com, also featured Dan's slide deck and presentation at DEF CON. which is a high mark for public relations for amateur radio and, of course, for Dan Romachek himself. So, bravo.
Yeah, bravo, Dan. Keep up the good work. And I know Karen was hoping to join you on the day you gave that lecture. I think that she may have had problems getting to you, but we all support you, Dan. So, good one. So, to our last news story, as I said, we're running late. There was obviously a bit of an outage, IT outage, back end of last week. But this is actually brings it into the RF arena. Broadcasters grapple with a global IT outage. Now, that's a bit of a problem for broadcasters as much as anybody else. Bill, do you want to go first?
This was Friday. We had the Y2K24 outage. That's the joke I'm reading online. But there's about 6 major players in the IT security market. One of them is a company by the name of CrowdStrike. Overnight Eastern time, probably 4 or 5 a.m. UK time on Friday, they sent out a channel file, which is basically like not really like a data definition file. It's a behavior file, is my understanding. And there was a flaw in the Windows client that CrowdStrike uses to protect those machines. And this channel file had the right codes in it to have the flaw exposed, and it crashed. I think the last number I read was like 8.5 million. And the part of the article that was interesting is the fact that it took a lot of radio broadcasters offline because they run their station automation on the Windows platform. And the computers, of course, were on, connected to the internet, looking for updates. CrowdStrike quickly identified this issue and pulled that channel update. However, if your machine got it, it required, manual intervention to get it to boot again. So that's kind of where things went south. But the important part I thought that was interesting is the integrated public alert and warning system was not affected. It was fully operational during this outage. So I'm wondering if that is hardware based or is that a non-Windows based system? And I'm going to have to dig a little deeper on that. I started, when you sent the news articles out yesterday, I started looking around. I really couldn't find any details on, what the integrated public alert and warning system hardware is. It's kind of a black box in some organizations. They just, plug it into their systems and, tune it to whatever it's supposed to listen to for a warning, whether it's online or another broadcaster in range. But it was still interesting that, this went across all verticals, education, airlines, government, businesses. But I never really thought as I was going through this how it would affect our emergency alert system. So I found that very interesting. And it's very interesting that was able to not be affected. Maybe it's a Windows system that's using something other than CrowdStrike. Like I said, I didn't find much online last night when I was looking for it. But it got me thinking quite a bit about it. And that is always a good article.
Yeah, I apologize to you and Chris because I spotted your Facebook post and I wrote a very flippant reply because I didn't really understand what was going on, and I just said I don't ever see the blue screen of death on Linux with a smiley face. And I didn't realize it was so many people got actually. This CrowdStrike was bigger than I knew about. So I suppose it's kind of been out of the industry for a while.
Yeah, and CrowdStrike had another channel update that took out some Linux systems. It was either last May or the May before. The months are blurring together now. But, I run Debian-based Linux at work. That's not really a secret. I'm pretty open about that because I believe in Debian Linux and the community. So when that particular update came out, I had a little bit of things to do as well. And has been no after action report yet from CrowdStrike. I mean, I'm certain that they're going to improve processes to avoid this in the future because they are a very large IT security vendor. And once again, the whole point of the article was that broadcasters got knocked offline in some cases, but at least our emergency warning system did not, which is good. That's reassuring.
Yeah, certainly. Now, Chris, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I think everything that Bill has said is accurate. I've just done a little check on the Linux CrowdStrike issue, and that was back in April, so I think it was this year. I guess less of an impact, perhaps. Perhaps there are less customers that use Linux with CrowdStrike, I don't know. As for the emergency warning system, I guess they weren't using CrowdStrike, or perhaps are not using Windows-based infrastructure. I'm lucky the organisation that I work for, and I work in the IT team, we've got a number of thousand servers, or devices that use Windows. We were not affected because we don't particularly use this particular solution. We use other products to do a similar thing, so we weren't affected. But I think it just highlights that now we're in this very connected world. There are some very powerful things out there that can cause huge amounts of disruption. I think it's been very clear this was not a cyber attack. It wasn't a nation state trying to affect the activities of a foreign country. This was a mistake by somebody working for, not somebody, by an organisation, perhaps not being as thorough with its testing of their updates, which has caused a huge impact. But the point is that we're now in a very connected world where these things are automatic, and you can wake up to having a huge impact, and this can be a real headache for IT departments. That as Bill was saying, there was a huge impact. Certainly over here, I know there were a number of airlines that were affected that had to cancel large numbers of flights. I know that the South Western Railway here in the UK, their ticket machines are all affected, and they've had to, from what I understand, they've had to send somebody around to go manually fix them. Thankfully, the fix isn't too difficult, but I think it does actually involve physically visiting or having access to the console of the device, which means that it's not just a restart that's required. I think you have to put it into safe mode and remove an update file, then restart the machine. Although there were news reports of having to reboot it 15 times or something. So it may take a little bit of time to fix each one. A friend of mine works for a large banking organisation, and on Monday he's messaging me to say, bear in mind this was Friday, this incident happened. On Monday they still had 4,500 servers that were affected. So I guess they prioritise the perhaps the more critical ones to fix. But there's a lot of, one mistake has caused a huge amount of impact. And I think the concern, this is not being an amateur radio story, but the concern is that we now start, as we're in such a joined up world, as moving towards cloud type services. And this wasn't a cloud issue. This is your own kit being affected by it. But as we're moving towards more centralised systems, particularly with cloud type things, an impact with a large technology supplier can have a big effect on lots and lots of organisations, as you were saying, I think, Bill, earlier, across a number of different industries, not just IT or banking or whatever. This affected all kinds of organisations. We had news, Sky News in the UK was off the air. Well, I don't think their broadcasting were okay, but the website was off the air for a while. Say ticket machines for buying your train ticket. I went round to the local co-op, which is a supermarket here in the UK. Big sign up saying we're only taking cash payments today. We can't take credit card payments due to it. Well, they said the Microsoft issue. As it turned out, it wasn't Microsoft's fault. It was an issue with CrowdStrike. But incredible the reliance we've now got on these large technology players to go about our daily lives. So I'm sure there'll be lots of lessons learned, and I'm sure there'll be governments and regulators that are taking note and perhaps thinking about how we can mitigate these risks, in the future.
Well, one of the things I couldn't understand when I heard more about it was that, in fairness, about 20 years ago, I was an operations manager for an absolute major corporate. I'm not going to mention their name, but desktop operations manager. Anything you saw on the desktop was my team's responsibility for, I think it was about 7,500 users. And it was very, very critical that we were able to fix things instantly if they were wrong. But any rollouts we were doing, I had a separate room with a server in it and all about 15 desktops in there, and we used to roll it out to those first, and then make sure that nothing went wrong. Then after that, if that went all very well, and we were convinced and happy, we roll out the fix to a few users in the environment that we knew weren't in a position where they if their system went down, they could recover from it. And I'm surprised that this company doesn't have something like that. But
so I think you're making some very good points, Martin. I think part of the issue is the frequency of these updates. These can be daily updates that are coming from these suppliers. And it sounds like you had a lot of diligence in those days about doing that testing yourself to be comfortable. I think now people are perhaps trusting the suppliers, and in this case, perhaps shouldn't have trusted the supplier to have tested it on your behalf. Bill, have you got some comments?
There's no easy way in the current iteration to stage this kind of update to a test group. But while I was talking, I did get an email from CrowdStrike with the preliminary post incident review. And two things jumped out at me that just blew my mind. Just reading this over while Martin was talking. They talked about testing. I searched it in the document. It's like mentioned 20 times. But they never actually tested this particular one on a live customer. And so one of the things that they're going to look at doing here is basically letting the customer determine how do you want to spool out these kind of sensor channel files so that maybe you can have some that go out to some machines for testing, exactly like Martin was talking about. I call it the canary in the coal mine pool, which on the Linux side, I have multiple hosts in the load balancer for web hosting. I have one host, actually it's two now, one of one configuration, one of another configuration. Those two hosts get machine, updates first, so I can make sure that the web host works. And I have things, little trickery things I do in the web balancer, so I'm hitting those hosts first when I just use those particular websites. And like I said, there's a lot here to read. So I'm gonna have to digest this a little bit later, but it's an unusual event, very unusual event, and I'm glad that they're going to make some changes. But now I worry about, my particular reality is, we're a CrowdStrike customer, but there's like 5 other major ones. Are the other 5 just sending, updates out like this, or are they, how are they handling it? Because what's going to happen is, I don't want to name and shame any other customer because this has CrowdStrike's name all over it. But the other ones, do they do the exact same thing? That's part of the thing I also worry about and wonder too, is for the folks that are using the other kinds of protection. Are you guys next?
I've just got a couple of points. Sorry, Bill, I know I'm talking a little bit here, Martin. Just a couple of little points. Just reading through, I'm looking through the same thing I think you're looking at, Bill. It looks like it was some automated testing that they rely on. They talk about having a content validator, and it looks like there was a bug in their automatic testing process, which, of course, then meant that there was the bug that was in the software release or the update wasn't picked up. So I think there's lots of lessons being learned here. Second point is that even if your organization doesn't use a particular product, nowadays companies outsource an awful lot of their IT to third parties, and lots of, like I say, cloud type services, or they call SaaS, software as a service things. Even if your own organization doesn't use a particular product, it's highly likely that one of your suppliers may do. And if you're relying on them to provide you with IT services, that can also have an impact on your business. So it's the world is, like I say, very connected these days, and it's a sort of interesting IT landscape. But anyway, I'll stop talking, Martin. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a lot more going to come out of this one. Martin, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'll bring it back on track in a second, but Chris mentioned like train company and stuff. My local train company will use any excuse not to run the trains, wrong type of rails on the line. That's the fault of the bloke that built the wing nuts or something like that. And cash only, a lot of people are asking for cash only. Well, up until a week or so ago, people were saying, "Oh no, we're card only, we're cashless." I don't think you can legally reject cash because it's legal tender. But this sort of thing, finally, Mac users sitting back quite happily eating their popcorn, watching the dumpster fire. But the thing that gets me is, and it really scares me, that people allow one company pretty much the ability to cripple the world's IT. Think along the lines of the Post Office Horizon scandal with Fujitsu. Have we learnt nothing? Never put your trust in one company. It really scares me. Things run, on Windows. Where is your redundant system? Critical thing. We go back to here to the broadcast and things. Critical systems. Where are your redundant systems that don't use those security products? Where are your things that are using rival products or that is managed in-house? So if something does go wrong, you just flip the switch and you're on your backup system and you barely miss a beat. In the radio world, we used to make people keep CDs in the machine ready to go, just so if something did go wrong, you could hit that button and you're back on the air with, no one's really noticed it, barring something sounding a bit odd for a few seconds. There is, by the way, a great video of Greg James from Radio 1 where his system would only play one song. No jingles, nothing else. And then he did come clean and said he was messing about for entertainment, but only when all the engineers rushed into the studio to help him, which was quite funny. But yeah, sorry, that just brings it back onto the broadcaster's side of it.
Yeah, interesting. Leslie, possibly not your field of expertise, but any thoughts?
No, I'm listening with it, very, very interested indeed. It isn't my field of expertise at all, but I do know the answer to that thing about legal tender, and I'll tell you another day because it's too long to do on this podcast. I do have the answer to that question, but I think it's already been covered. Everything's already been covered by what everyone else has said.
Yeah, no problems at all. Frank, have I left you anything to say on this one?
Yeah, I just want to chime in on something Bill brought up because I think it's really important. He was commenting that the emergency EAS system didn't go down. Was that right, Bill?
I'm afraid Bill's had to leave us, Frank.
Okay. Well, I believe he did. I was just going to say this, that the EAS system is in a transition since November 2022. They're moving from kind of an RF thing where, because, you've got radio broadcasters, TV broadcasters, and then you got those that are not technically on RF per se, although they do have microwave systems, satellite, cable TV, and wireline. You got a morass of these different operators, and they all have to comply to this emergency access system. They've been going from an RF where you capture the audio from the nearest station. And if you're here in the States, our listeners will know this, there's a kind of a very awkward squawking sound and then terrible audio that this is an alert from the emergency, whatever. It used to be called emergency broadcast system. And that's because it was picked up over the air. Well, they've been transitioning to an IP, Internet Protocol format. And so there are 3 manufacturers who make that equipment, and they're not going to tell you what they run because they don't want you entering the system and doing things that mess it up. If you were here in the States a few years ago, remember in the state of Hawaii, there was an EAS transmission that said, atomic missile inbound, you have 5 minutes or something like that. And it was wrong. There was no missile. It was a screw up in the message. So if in Martin Rothwell's comment, they put the wrong CD in, Martin.
Do you know what, Frank? You talk about like the screeching noise over the air, which is obviously some kind of access that tells the next station in the chain to switch to it. There was a DJ in America that got in a lot of trouble because he recorded it when it went out, got really cross because it interrupted his show. came back on air the following day and said, if you're wondering what happened, this is what went down on the air yesterday, and then played the thing out, having recorded it. And of course, because he captured the data string and played that out as well, all the next radio stations got an EAS alert.
Oh, wow.
He got in a lot of trouble for rebroadcasting it.
Well, because the first part of that conversation, Martin, was, this is the FCC. We're going to put your license on hold. Now, let me speak to the manager.
Yes.
So there are three companies. Yeah, there are three companies, Digital Alert Systems, Gorman, Redlick, and Sage Alerting Systems, that manufacture the gear. And I think it's you pick one company and get yours because you got to have it. Anyway, I was going to throw that in. Bill raised a very, very good point. That system in the States is in some type of transition. But boy, isn't it suddenly a small world, as Martin Rothwell said, when you put all your eggs in that proverbial basket. Wow.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, that completes us on our news stories. Bill's just joined us back again, which is good news. So, guys, I know a couple of you are on hard stop. So, Martin, do you want to go first on what you've been up to?
Yeah, well, not very much in the radio world at the moment. I've been playing around, just having a bit of a listen on the local repeaters and things like that. Playing with the talk group, of course. I pop up on the talk group via DMR a fair amount. Got a few family issues at the moment. I say family issues, things going on in my family that I can't talk about at the moment. All good. That have taken up a lot of my time, so less time to play radio. But also discovered that my 4-meter antenna, which is 3/4 wave stereo antenna, had an issue that's quite well known with it apparently, where you get water in it and the SWR goes sky high, the impedance goes the other way, and I think that's happened. So I need to get up on the roof, get that down. It happened to me once before when I didn't waterproof it properly because I foolishly thought it would last. But I have waterproofed it. I think some of the tape has perished or whatever. So I need to get that down. But yeah, that's a project for another day. And looking at the pole, I probably need to get another scaffold pole as well from somewhere. So yeah, but that's pretty much what I've been up to.
Right. Well, we will chat later in the week, Martin, and thanks for your input. And as you say, getting your foot back on 4 meters should be fun. Right, Bill, I know you're on a hard stop, but what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Quite a bit, actually. I started a month off with, I took a week off and doing projects around the house. During that week was the 13 colony special event, and I worked all 13 colonies and 2 of the bonus stations, the Philadelphia bonus station and the France bonus station. So sorry, our friends in Great Britain, I could not hear you at all. I heard people calling you, but I just could not hear the British station this year. I did all CW, all QRP, which this is 3rd or 4th year I've done that. And that was fun. I've done quite a bit of POTA stations, worked a whole bunch of DX on FT8, got the American Samoa DXpedition KAR on 20 meters Super Fox. So what Super Fox is a proposed upgrade to the Fox Hound mode of FT8 in WSJTX. It's in one of the release candidates, the latest one. And basically what it does is instead of sending out parallel FT8 signals, it sends out a wider signal with a lot more information in it. And the idea being is that you won't be splitting your power up into discrete FT8 signals as you're applying as the DXpedition. So I was able to work them and tried to catch them some more before they move on. I think they're going, well, it just left my mind, but they're going to another island for a DXpedition. So they're going to be active again from the South Pacific. So that'll be exciting. Likewise, during the month, I joined the Long Island CW Club. So the idea being is I was doing CW. I'm still struggling. I'm running about 13 to 15 words a minute. I mess up continuously on G's.
Slow down. Slow down.
Yeah, I need to slow down. Yeah, but even then, I keep messing up on G's and F's, and I'm really good at copying 0s, 3s, and 5s. Everything else, I kind of peter off on. So I'm gonna do some classes there and get back mental head copy recognition of the code. And then the last thing that happened was that Chris Howard, M0TCH, shared a photo of a orange handy talkie. And it just happened to be that the wife handed me a scratch-off lottery ticket that paid for 2 of those. So I now have a pair of them programmed identical, one in each of my backpacks, because that's the other thing that happened this month was I upgraded the soda bag. I got a bag that is the same weight, but like a third bigger, so I have more room to move around. And I have a back order on a part for the Secret Squirrel soda antenna project, which once that comes in, I'll take some photos and share it with everybody. But, not spoiling the surprise, Bill joined the chameleon family.
I was going to ask, Bill, did you buy the orange one?
Yes, I only bought it because it was orange.
Perfect.
I sent you the boot screen. I made my own.
You did?
Screen.
Okay. So for those that's listening in black and white, you're probably aware that the ICQ podcast, if you've never seen any of our videos, we are very much an orange branded podcast. So we have a few orange radios that are very much on brand that we sometimes take along to events.
Yes, and at Dayton, I was the only one without an orange radio. Well, now both of my backpacks that I have with me, depending on whether I'm just normal hiking or soda hiking, now have orange HTs in the side, which I thought I carry around this. I have a couple UV5Rs that I bought a very, very long time ago, and one of them is in every backpack. Well, now they're upgraded to orange, and there's a few features on it that I would like it better as an emergency carry radio. Flashlight being one of them, and the alarm sound. That alarm sound is way loud. So I figured that's probably a better idea to put. Oh, and the NOAA, it receives NOAA weather radio here in the States, so I'm able to use that function as well on it. So that's pretty much everything I've been doing this month. And it's been, I've been very, very busy, very, very active up until the last couple of days because we've had multiple evenings of thunderstorms. So I get done at work and I would not be able to get on the radio until thunderstorms roll through. So that knocked off a little activity recently, but I've been very busy this month.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it, Bill, and sounds like you've been having fun as well. So that's all good news. Frank, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, Martin, very little on the ham radio side. I had asked you to announce, I guess a month ago when my last cycle was supposed to be, is that I was recovering from prostate cancer surgery. And so I was diagnosed back in March with a highly aggressive form of adenocarcinoma in the prostate, the second level prostate cancer. The first level, as they often say, it will never catch your age. You'll die from something else before that gets you. Well, this was not that. This was an adenocarcinoma, and it had a Gleason score of 8, which runs up to 10, and 8 through 10 are highly aggressive. Did some checking around after getting a biopsy and things, and one of the friends of our show, Dr. Scott Wright, K0MD, and I were talking. He said, well, Frank, Mayo Clinic is one of the tops in prostate cancer. So, you might want to take a look at some people here. And I was thankful to have taken Scott's advice and very quickly was there at Mayo Clinic. I had what's called robotic prostate surgery, which is where they put 5 probes into your gut just above your navel. They remove your prostate with an incision just above your navel. They've got cameras in there and all this kind of stuff. So I will say this. I cannot say enough good things about the healthcare at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. I've never come close to seeing that quality of healthcare. I've heard about the Mayo experience, but to men who are listeners or those who love men, if you're 50 or over, get your PSA test. Don't ignore it. I didn't, and that's probably what saved my life because it was diagnosed fairly quickly. You don't have to get a biopsy if you have a PSA over the critical value of 4. I didn't. I had what's called a 4K test, and that's to determine if you really do need a biopsy. And in my case, I did. So it's something that certainly does not have to be a life ender. Robotic surgery has far less impact. I chose that over radiation. And I was very fortunate to have one of the top robotic surgeons and a radiation oncologist who helped develop those little small nuclear seeds of some 20 years ago. He has a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT with a specialty in nuclear. Gosh, what better training for that? Anyway, so Martin, I'll kind of sum up there. That's what I've been doing. I've been recovering. It's a little like the stock market, as I told the team here. It's up one day, down the next, but in general, it's going forward. My stamina and strength is getting back on pace. Thursday, which will be before the podcast drops, so by the time anyone hears this, I'll be able to lift more than 10 pounds and can take the garbage out and take the groceries out of the car and do a lot of those honeydews that my wife depends on me to do, but she's had to do over the last several months. Been also tinkering with a little antenna design and that sort of thing. And anyway, I just want to thank everybody on the team for being encouraging and supportive.
Well, as I say, I know you have been busy and one thing and another and writing as well. And putting up with me occasionally, Frank, when I rung you up. But yeah, we've had some great chats over the last 4 weeks, and long may they continue. But I'm glad to hear you're feeling much, much better, and I'm sure you'll be out operating fairly soon in the field. Right, Leslie, what have you been up to?
Well, apart from this IT system here that seems to be going on the blinks. Anyway, the only thing that's happened since we last spoke is I gave that talk on cable losses and demonstrated losses on a lump of cable and changed it over to some better stuff. Anyway, it went very well, I thought. The old, what they call it, the classical method, 2 meters, two RF meters, so you see the input, see the output, bit of mathematics, and I know, yeah, again, everyone always rolls at that. But I said, look, you don't need to actually do that because now we've got all these fancy meters and everything, and this is what you do, and this will show you the results. So that, I think, went very, very successful. That's the only thing from this end, Martin.
Yeah, sounds interesting, and be careful. Chris is often looking for presenters for the club talks.
What date can you do, Leslie?
I did it on cable losses.
Right, we'll get you in the calendar.
Anyway, Chris, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, not a massive amount. We had a great talk last week about satellite communications, which was actually quite inspirational because Monday night, Tim Price. So the talk was by a lady called Dr. Heather Nichols, HMO. And yeah, she did a talk about satellite operations. And yeah, Tim actually made his own little aerial, his own satellite aerial. So it was a dual band 77s and 2 meter aerial. He came up on Monday night up to the club evening, and he had with him an FT817. And I think it was I forget which one it was now, basically a handheld. So he actually connected I think it was the 2 meter part of the aerial to the FT817, and then the handheld was going to the 77 side. Or I might have got that wrong around. But essentially, there was an ISS pass, and Tim actually managed to get a couple of contacts via the repeater on the ISS. So it was actually really quite impressive. We weren't really sure it was going to work or not, and I did actually put a little video onto our club Facebook group, which shows Tim operating. So yeah, it was actually really quite successful. So thanks, Heather, for the talk. certainly inspired us to, or certainly Tim, to show us how that all works. That was good. And then later on that night, Martin, you and I went along to visit the address of an ex-club member who sadly now has moved into a nursing home. And we were invited by his family to go along and have a look at some of his equipment, essentially to look to see if we could help with, finding it a better home, shall we say. So we've sort of gone along, give some advice, looked at the stuff that was actually had some value and looked at the stuff that probably didn't have any value and sort of gave them, and that's kind of what clubs are for, really, isn't it? It's about helping people in those sort of situations. So we're able to sort of say, look, this stuff here, keep that. Don't sell that for anything under £300. That's actually got some, that item. But actually, that one there, that can probably go in the bin, frankly. And actually, that one there, where you don't plug it in because it's actually not fused and it's not got an earth, that sort of thing. So it was quite a useful thing, I think, for the family. And then, as Bill mentioned, I was actually at an air show at the weekend, the Royal International Air Tattoo. And I took along my orange Baofeng radio for a couple of reasons. I actually had a couple of radios, but that was the one that I kind of had in the pocket in the bag. It's a UV17 Pro. I have the orange version, I guess for mainly for podcast reasons. Also, if you drop it, you can find it quite easily as well. So that's another big benefit. A couple of things I quite like about it, and one is the fact that it's airband receive as well. So if you're at an air show, you can actually listen into the action on airband, which is quite nice. But there was actually a commercial or a broadcast radio station that was relaying the commentary, so you could actually listen to the commentary. So you weren't near one of the Tannoy speakers. Other brand speakers are available. You weren't near to the PA system. You could actually listen on the radio as well. Now, we were actually in a campsite just outside. There was a 2-day event. The first day, we were actually in a campsite just outside the air show, so we could see everything's going on, but we're just outside it on literally the perimeter fence. And we used the Baofeng to tune into the broadcast FM band. Unfortunately, the receive wasn't very good. And how can we that the air was pretty decent on there. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, but it just wasn't very good on receive. And I thought back to something that Martin talked about a few years ago, I think, on the podcast, which used to actually attach a pigtail, so basically a random bit of wire, and attach it to the base of the aerial. So essentially the earth bit, the outer, not the centre pin, but kind of the outer sheathing, I suppose, or the kind of the earth, essentially. Attach that to that part of the radio, and it made an absolutely massive difference. And suddenly it was night and day. So thank you, Martin, for that suggestion, and it worked really well. And did that, and everything was good. So apart from that, haven't really done any other radio operation at all. Been very busy. I've not had hardly any spare time at all, I'm afraid, since the last episode. So that's about it from me.
Yeah, that sounds like you've been busy. And for broadcast station, it could be a random length of wire. But ideally, if you're on 2 meters or 70 sems, if you can put on a quarter wave for those frequencies, you can join the two to put 2 wires into a crimp, and then you just connect it to the earth of your radio, usually on the aerial socket. Sometimes you screw the SMA in through it, and yes, as Chris said, it's like light and day. Your transceiver is far more awake, and the signals go further. Luckily, in the camper van, I have a little toolbox, and in there I had a reel of wire, so it was pretty straightforward. Literally, I stripped the end of the wire. It was probably about, half a metre or something, so it probably actually wasn't far off a quarter wavelength anyway for that band randomly. But just stripped the end of the wire off, wrapped it around the base of the aerial so it's at the earth section, and screwed it back on. Away it went. That's a real good one. Right, we're running long, so I'm going to try and be quick on this. What have I been up to? Well, I've built a couple of external keypads for my pair of ICOM radios, so I can now, instead of having to go into the menu to push the voice key, I can push a button on my external keypad, and they work both well. Both work well now. I've tested them, and one thing and another. Been doing some training with our lady at the club, and hopefully we're progressing. Been working on another project. Can't tell you too much about it at the moment, but hopefully, it is a radio-related project, but it's a bit hush-hush at the moment, so we'll let you know when I can tell you more. Have operated on the talk group. In fact, there's not been a lot happening on the talk group, but Phil VK6ADF and I had another long conversation that went the best part of 2.5 hours this afternoon. So there is activity on there. I've also done some HF, some VHF and UHF from the car. I fixed a multimeter of mine. Suddenly found it wasn't working on current. I could, and I thought, oh no, what's gone wrong? Opened it up. There's a fuse. The fuse was blown. So it's a nice simple fault. Took me longer to find a fuse in my stack of fuses than it did to fix the thing, but don't know if I blew it or whether it was blown with one of the students doing something, but it's fixed now. And last but not least, my daughter was at the same air show as you, Chris, and I mentioned on the last podcast that I got her a Quansheng UV K5, and I'd removed the solder joint or disconnected the PTT switch because she's not a licensed amateur, and she thoroughly enjoyed listening on her little handy talkie at the same air show you were at. So,
more importantly, Martin, was it an orange Quansheng?
No, she didn't want an orange one. She wanted a military camouflage one, which I tried to talk her out of, because if she drops it on the ground in the grass, it's going to be a bitch to find.
Probably still there now, but okay.
No, she's got it at home. She says it works really well, and her and her fella don't live that far from Gatwick, so they can listen to Gatwick as well at the time. So, yeah. So all in all, that's what I've been up to. All's left for me to do is thank you guys for turning up tonight. Bill's had to leave, but I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Thank you, guys. Another interesting episode.
Yeah, and I got it wrong. Bill hasn't left. It's my Rothwell's that actually left. So I'd like to thank Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B.
Yes, thank you again, Martin. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good to hear you, Bill. I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Glad to be here, Martin. Really, really good to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back, Frank, as always. And last but not least, thank you, Leslie, Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
First, I've got to say, get well soon, Frank. Just keep doing what you're doing because it's the right thing. Martin, thank you very much for having me on. No
problems at all. All that's left for me to do is say 73s and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheerio.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. The RSGB convention has been announced for 2024, taking place at its usual venue at Kents Hill Park in Milton Keynes on the weekend of the 11th and 13th October. So basically, if you're interested in the amateur radio and, interested in all things to do with AMSAT and the general health of the hobby, there's plenty of speakers already lined up to give fantastic presentations and practical activities. So there's going to be 3 main streams, one called Getting Started, aimed at want to try something new, operating and technical. Now there's a link on the RSGB's website, which will pop on our website for you to get to, or the August copy of Radcom will have more information, so keep an eye out for that if you're an RSGB member. So certainly an event to look forward to in October. Now, some of our ICQ podcast presenters are helping to support International Dog Day, which is a special event station highlighting the need for rescue efforts. And the day will take place on the from now through to, I think it's the end of August. There's going to be various call signs available, including Yankee Lima 1 Dog for most of August, potentially even September as well. So it's running on quite nicely there. Now, it's not just our canine friends that are going to have their own International Dog Day. International Cat Day will have special events, operations as well on the 8th of August, including Yankee Lima 1 Cat and GB4 Cat, which is going to be operated by our own Edmund Spicer. So certainly, if you're a lover of our four-legged friends, certainly listen out for those special event stations. Graham G7 Lima Mike Foxtrot contacts us to let us know about the Telford Handfest, which will be taking place on Sunday the 1st of September. And not only is there going to be all the usual wonderful joys of a UK Handfest, but it's also on at the same time as the GQRP convention. You can also have the chance of meeting up with the ICQ podcast, so Martin Butler M1MRB, who will be attending this event as well. So it's a great opportunity there if you're in the Midlands to take part, and it's only £5 admission, and Telford's very easy to get to from most parts of the Midlands. So do check that event out, and thanks Graham for letting us know about that event. Right, now we head over to our features episode, and this episode's feature is looking behind the scenes of special event stations. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Each month on the bands, there are special event stations to commemorate or remind us all of historic events or to point out organisations that need to be celebrated. For most hams, these are a chance to get out of the ordinary call signs and QSL cards or perhaps even a certificate. This ICQ podcast feature aims to take a small look behind the scenes of two upcoming events, the International Cat Day on August the 8th and the International Dog Day on August the 26th. So I'll start by going straight to Hans, YL3JD, who will be using YL1DOG. Can you give us a background to the event, Hans? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ed. Yes, Yankee Lima 3 Julia Delta and the special event station Yankee Lima 1 Dog. No problem getting this from the Latvian authorities already for the third year. We have two dogs from the shelter. Being there made me really aware of how packed these shelters are and how hard the people have to work and what's coming in every day. Yes, that made me realize really what was going on. Then I got a QSO with CS1, CS2 Cat, Portugal. And that gave me the idea, hey, what can I do with my hobby? And I just thought, well, I will take a special call sign and I'll start making QSOs, hoping to get more attention all over the world about these packed dog shelters and what's going on. About 3 years ago, I started with a few friends from Holland. They got also a dog call sign and we just started making QSOs. A friend of mine, Yevgeny, here in Latvia, we talked about it, of course, and he is a real cat lover. So he took the call sign Yankee Lima 1 Cat and he starts just making QSOs and he was doing it alone. The first year I've sent somewhere around 500 QSL cards with a little information on the backside of the card and hoping that would give some more attention to what's going on in these dog shelters. Then I just did it for the second year and I met with Chris. And all of a sudden, Karijn was there, all the other stations were there, and now we are with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 call signs, and Karijn with a multi-operator call sign. And at the moment, Yevgeny is not alone anymore. There's GB4 Cat and GB9 Cat. So it really starts to roll.
Thanks, Hans. That's a great introduction. And just to say, Yevgeny YL2TD, who will be YL1 Cat, unfortunately couldn't be with us this evening. And also Mark G1 Papa India Echo, who's going to be GB5 NDG, also not able to make it. And a couple of the others may join us as we go around the round table. Okay, I'm now going over to Karen, KD2GUT, who will be operating K2D with a group of people. Karen, what's all the special scheduling needed to be able to operate the same call sign for a special event? How is that going to happen? Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Ed. This is, first of all, a pleasure to be joining Hans in this effort and taking this truly international to where the United States can participate. And we have a team that will be using Kilo 2 Delta 1x1 call sign that we will have available to us from the 21st through to the end of the 26th of August. We have 9 operators, myself included. Each op is in a different state here in the U.S., so there will be identifiers when they post on the clusters. So we'll have Kilo 2 Delta /4/1 and so on and so forth. Kilo 2 Delta with me here in New York, I will just identify as Kilo 2 Delta. We will be coordinating with one another. We're keeping the group small this year to test and see how we can all work with one another. We will be also doing it as POTA. We will be able to, through the help of a wonderful POTA administrator, people who work the station can get POTA credit as well, which makes it extra fun. Maybe some of them will bring their dogs into the park with them. Most of the ops, not all of them, most of them do have rescue dogs. I myself, over the years, have had a few. As an adult, we've had 2 here at home. I grew up with 3 dogs, but 2 of them were rescue. So we truly believe in this. The group will be able to operate whenever they can, whenever they want. The key here will be communication. That's always the key, isn't it? And these 9 ops, many of them know one another. So this is kind of a test to see if we can do it as multi-op, to see how it works, to see how it goes, what our strengths and weaknesses are, and hopefully next year we can join Hans again. We will be operating independently from the overseas teams, but we are going to coordinate and support one another and encourage our contacts to reach out to the other ops. We are doing CW and sideband only to encourage people to communicate, to talk about rescue, to share stories about their dogs, to learn different ways that they can be useful to rescues. And we will have a very nice downloadable certificate at the end of the event. I'm really, really looking forward to this, Ed.
Thank you, Karen. Good luck, as you're saying, it's a test this year and be even more operators from that side of the pond next year. Bringing the conversation back to the UK side of the pond, I want to go on to Chris, G5VZ, who will be operating GB0DOG, and I believe you also took part last year in the International Dog Day, Chris. Another question for you, how difficult was it and what process did you have to follow in the UK to be able to get a special event call sign?
First of all, thanks, Ed, for bringing more attention to what I think is an important effort that we're making for animals that many of us love and care for. I came to this through a first QSO with Hans operating YL1DOG, I think 2 years ago. So it was last year that I applied for and had Golf Bravo 0 Delta Oscar Golf. And shortly after I secured that special event call, I also spoke to David G4YVM and he went with GB4 Dog. You asked about the process here in the UK. Well, in the UK, a special event station is only licensed for a single location. So unlike the US, we can't have a team effort run across multiple QTHs. So GB0 Dog is run from my home QTH here. Getting the call sign is relatively straightforward now. There are no forms to fill in or fees to pay here in the UK. We simply go to the RSGB website and make an application, and then within 24 hours usually have a confirmation of that. Only issue here was that GB0 dog had been used by the Reading Radio Club for a guide dog event a few years ago. So first of all, we had to differentiate what I was doing from what they were doing, and we also had to unpick that from clublog and QRZ.com. But that was again something that the facilitators or moderators at both of those websites were very helpful with. So as soon as I had it, I had some QSL cards printed up with our current canine companion, Willow, on that. And since then, he has been very pleased to be sent to several dozen stations in August last year with his photo on the QSL card. And he's also enjoying, I think, having his photograph on QRZ.com and in several ham radio magazines as well.
Thanks, Chris. That was very good. And you've answered another question I was going to ask later on, which was, can the station be operated from a portable location, or is it locked to an address? And from what you say, it's locked to an address, unfortunately.
Absolutely, Ed. It could be a portable location, and if it is, that you then have to give National Grid reference for it and stay there.
And you mentioned David G4YVM, who had hoped to join us this evening as well, but unfortunately hasn't made it. But he will be on as GB4DOG. We've also got Simon G0FOZ, who will be on as GB9CAT for the International Cat Day. And the other operator we've got is ICQ's own special event guru, that's Edmund M0MNG, who will be running GB4CAT. So Edmund, perhaps you can cover a little bit of what happens with QSL cards or the certificates, or what's happening in your case there, and if you are providing a special QSL or certificate for a special event call sign, how does that work? I presume it can only be applied for directly. I mean, that's not going to work through bureaus and things, is it? Over to you, Edmund.
Well, I don't know so much about certificates. Regarding QSL cards, yes, I will probably have some done depending on how many QSOs I manage to make and how many people express an interest in having a QSL card. The maximum duration that you can have a special event station licence for is currently 28 days. I say currently, actually, because I think later in 2024, Ofcom are going to make more changes of one type or another, and some of those could involve special event stations. So if we were having this conversation in 1 year's time, things may be slightly different compared to how they are now. But as things stand at the moment, as has been said, you have to be in a fixed geographical location. In my case, that's my home, so if anybody's in the local area and wants to come in and visit the station or operate, then they would be very welcome. The only other real criteria that needs to be met is that the special event celebrates or commemorates something that most people would deem worthy of celebration or commemoration. Well, the Cat Day certainly ticks that box for reasons that have already been explained. So I did think about having the licence for the full 28 days, but I work full-time. August is quite busy. There's other amateur radio events. So I have only applied for a 4-day licence from International Cat Day itself on the Thursday the 8th of August, through until the following Sunday. So on the basis that I'm only going to be on for 4 days, I will wait until afterwards to draw conclusions about how many QSL cards I need to have printed, Ed.
Thanks, Edmund. And I was going to sum that up at the end, but we'll throw it in here. International Cat Day is on August the 8th. International Dog Day is on August the 26th. But as you pointed out, these special event calls can be in the UK up to 28 days. So different stations are going to be on the bands at different times for different numbers of days. Actually, I'll give a little bit of background. I also had intended representing Germany in this event, in the International Dog Day event, because I also have a dog from the pound, and very much I'm in favour of what's going on here. But the statement I got from the regulator in Germany was that special event calls here in Germany have to be for something where public is involved, ideally at the location of whatever you're supporting. So, for example, the International Lighthouse weekend is good because you're near the lighthouse, you're promoting the lighthouse to the public and you're promoting amateur radio to the public. In the case of the International Cat Day and Dog Day, so far, most of the operators who have talked about this at the moment are not going to be actually operating from a dog hospital or a dog pound or at a cat home or anything. And I would have to try and arrange that to be able to get a special event call sign in Germany. So the regulations and the rules around special event call signs and when you can have them seem to be different from country to country. Another question is, how do we as radio amateurs through this event actually generate some information, revenue for the people that need the help in the cause that we're advertising? In this case, we're talking about getting people somehow to either finance or help in some way the animal care people. Chris, do you have a comment on that?
Certainly on the reverse side of my paper QSL cards, I have a little bit about the Dogs Trust here in the UK and about animal charities worldwide. So that's certainly getting the message out. And if I can also add that so far this month, in 23 days of July, we've actually had 3 gigabytes of traffic on the dogdayradio.org website.
Finishing up. All I can say is I wish you all success for the 2 special events, and perhaps some of the listeners listen for call signs that end with DOG or CAT, and if you hear the stations on, please give them a call. So I'll close it up there, and I'll say 73s to everybody, and wish you all success in August.
Many thanks, Ed. 73.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
73.
Thank you.
The ICQ Podcast Digital Voice Talk Group. Your digital home away from home. Worldwide.
Many thanks to Ed and Karen for our feature this episode, and I say it's great to have a look behind the scenes and what I say is involved, etc., in a special event station. So many thanks, guys, for putting together that feature for us, and hopefully might give you some ideas, etc., for your next special event station you might be thinking of doing. Well, feedback this episode comes from Doug Rosser, who goes by the call signs of VK2 Echo Yankee, M1 Kilo India Quebec, and November 1 Kilo India Quebec. And he says, in relation to Director for Exams, Australia also offers entry to any of the 3 qualification levels with no requirement to have passed one of the lower levels. Standard, Intermediate General, and the Advanced, equivalent to 4 and Extra, require assessment on a separate regulations exam. All levels require practical assessment, which is interesting as it is modelled on the now redundant UK requirement. So thanks, Doug. And Doug's a ACMA assessor as well. So it's good to get his feedback in relation to what goes on in Australia, Dad.
Yeah, it certainly is. And yeah, I was looking at the feedback on the practical, and that only got dropped because of COVID and people were able to take their exams at home. I still think that if you've got a student, they're worth doing the practicals because they get so much out of them. And certainly our intermediate, a lot of people got a hell of a lot out of those practicals. So it's a shame they don't do them anymore, but whenever I teach it, I try and add it in to help people. And I'm sure I've worked, Doug, a few times on the digital talk group. So good to hear from you, Doug. Yeah. Back to you, Colin.
Yeah, and if you're interested in, say, speaking to your ICQ podcast presenters or your fellow listeners, the ICQ podcast talk group is a great way of getting involved in that. So if you want to find out more details about it, go to the podcast page, and you can find out the the group numbers, etc., that you need to program into your radio. And the great thing is, because we've got the transcoder in the middle, doesn't matter what mode you use, you'll be able to communicate away, I say, on the ICQ podcast digital talk group. So I say check that out. Well, as mentioned, this month is our birthday month, and it's been a wonderful support. Some of the people that have helped us out, and we've still got a few more to thank in our next episode. We just had to cut them off more for time point of view. Is D. Renton, Roy Jones, Frank Westphal, Kilo 6, Foxtrot Whiskey 1, Simon Wilton, Victor Alpha 3, Sierra India, and Golf 7 Hotel Charlie Delta, Denny Morris, Golf Mike 1, Bravo Alpha November, Stephen Lehman, Sierra Mike 5, Yankee Romeo Alpha, and John Stengel, Whiskey 8 Uniform Charlie. Thank you guys for your very kind donations to the ICQ podcast to help us out, keep us advert free, and more importantly, show the value that you find in the show. Now, this is a very, very important month for us. It helps us build a wonderful base to keep us, paying our way for the rest of the year. So, as I say, don't hold back. If you wish to show your thanks to the team and show them what we do, a simplified donation page is now available. icqpodcast.com/donate. Where there's a couple of options there now, including subscription models for monthly and annual subscription model, where you can choose the amount that you wish to donate. So please do check out those donation links there. Right, we'd like to also thank Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, for taking part in the News Roundtable. Many thanks, guys, for helping Dad out with that. And certainly we've generated lots of thoughts and opinions in this episode, so hopefully you got something from their taking part there. Right, well, I'm going to be honest, I'm about to rush off and grab an aeroplane and go off on holiday. So I'll be taking my Mrs. B off to sunnier climes. But while my Mrs. B is, probably enjoying cocktails, etc., your Mrs. B requires a cup of tea, I believe, to be kept warm in London.
Certainly does, certainly does. We're going to have a cup of tea in a minute and find something nice. And while you're away and this podcast release, it's too late for people, but I have published it on the interweb. It is the Grand Field Day this weekend. And if you hear this before Sunday morning or early Sunday morning, down in Ashford in Kent is a nice little rally. It's free entry. If you're a trader, it's free entry. All they ask is that if you do turn up, don't bring food and drink with you, buy it in the canteen, which is not overpriced. It's very reasonable priced, and it's the way that we get a feel for nothing if people use the canteen. And one other thing is, it's worth, if you've got some time after the rally, they do tours of the windmill. And I did it last year with Chris and Bex, his lady, and it was a very, very interesting tour. So, Mrs. B and I will be there, along with Edmund, and I'm now off to make that cup of tea, Colin.
Fantastic. Well, so you go look after that there, and we'll catch up with one in a fortnight's time. 73's all.
Yeah, 73.